Saw and pulse waveforms. We begin in a section of the synth known as the oscillator. The oscillator is responsible for generating your initial raw sound, which is known as a waveform. The two most commonly used waveforms are saw and pulse. Here's the saw. Very bright and edgy. The saw is a great all-purpose waveform that is used for a lot of different things. Now here's the pulse. I like to think of the pulse as having a more video game-esque quality. A lot of people describe it as being more artificial sounding than the saw. Another big difference is down in the lower register. Here's the saw. Very kind of thin and buzzy, whereas the pulse, also buzzy, but it has this big heavy low end. You'll want to keep this in mind when designing a bass patch. You can use saw or pulse, but pulse will give you a naturally bigger low end. So if you're looking for that heavier bass, go for the pulse. In the next challenge, you'll set the waveform. Now, as we just learned, there are only two choices, saw and pulse. And by default, your patch is always set to saw. A couple of the hidden patches are also going to be set to saw. In these cases, you don't have to do anything other than click submit. This, of course, will not be common in future lessons. 99% of the time, you'll have to change at least one setting, if not more. But for this first challenge, listen carefully and determine whether you need to change the waveform to pulse or just leave it at saw. Pulse width. Pulse waveforms are unique in that many synths allow you to change their shape by adjusting what's known as their pulse width. Switching to pulse, here's our regular pulse wave sound. Now in this default full pulse width state, it's also known as a square wave. Same thing as a pulse wave, just a different name. However, when we change the pulse width, listen to what happens to the sound. It gets thinner, edgier, almost more saw-like. Watch the shape. Even the shape gets thinner. Now, as I said, it kind of gets more saw-like. So in the higher ranges, like around, say, here, you'll want to be kind of careful because particularly the medium and thin pulse waves can kind of sound similar. Here's our saw. Here's a thin pulse. Very similar. Here's a medium pulse. And here's the saw again. So be careful in those higher ranges because it can be easy to confuse saw and a thin or medium pulse wave. Just remember, the pulse wave has that somewhat more artificial video game-like quality to it. One last thing to note, the pulse width has no effect on saw waves. Only pulse waves. In the next challenge, you'll set the waveform and, if necessary, the pulse width.